ever sneak a peek at those corporate training rooms and wonder, like, what really goes on in there?
Right.
Today's deep dive, we're going inside the world of management training. And let me tell you,
Okay.
it is way more strategic than it might seem from the outside.
Absolutely. And, we hear so much about leadership and all these inspiring leader things, but there's this whole other practical side to it, almost tactical, when you think about it.
Yeah.
Most people don't really get until they're in that manager seat.
Okay, so our source material for this deep dive makes a pretty bold claim about all this, and I'm curious to see what you make of it.
Okay.
They basically come out and say that management training is all about giving managers the tools to avoid firing people. Okay.
Is that overstating it?
It's funny because it's not as much of an overstatement as you might think.
Really?
Yeah, the point isn't to make firing impossible.
Right.
But it's about giving managers this whole range of other options.
I see.
They can try before they even get to that point.
Yeah.
So it's more like making sure that termination is the last resort.
Yeah.
Not the first thing they jump to.
Oh, okay. So instead of it being like, oh, this isn't working, time to let them go.
Right.
It's more like, hold on.
Yeah. What else can we try here?
What else can we do?
Exactly.
Yeah. Which, when you think about it from a purely practical standpoint, that makes a lot of sense because hiring, onboarding.
Huge. That's a whole...
It's such a time suck.
Yeah. And the expense.
Oh my gosh. I was reading a study, I think it was from SHRM. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. But they were saying that replacing an entry-level employee could cost a company almost $20,000.
Wow.
When you think about all the recruitment and then the training and the lost productivity, it really adds up.
Yeah, it's not just like, oh, well, their salary is this, so it's fine.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
There's so much more.
So having managers who can actually improve employee performance.
Yeah.
That's gold to companies. That saves a ton of money.
So then spill the beans.
Okay.
What are these magical tools that managers get?
Right.
Because it can't just be a nice person.
Right.
What can they actually do to turn things around?
Well, it's not magic, but it's definitely more than just being nice.
Yeah. And we're talking about concrete strategies. And one major area is change management.
Change management. How does that play into an employee who's maybe not performing the way that, you would hope?
So it's about stepping back and looking at the bigger picture, right?
Okay.
Management training, it really stresses that it's important to analyze if it's the work environment itself.
Oh.
That's contributing to the problem, not just the employee.
So instead of just being like, oh, this person isn't working out, it's like,
right.
Is there something around them that we could change?
Exactly. Have they been set up for success?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Are there obstacles that management should be addressing instead?
Interesting.
It's a different way of looking at it.
It is. Okay, so that's one. You're saying change management.
And that actually leads us to another key tool, which is training and development.
Okay.
This is a big part of management training, is recognizing that sometimes an employee doesn't need to be fired. They just need more support.
Oh, that's interesting.
Or development.
Yeah. So instead of being like, you're out, it's like,
right.
Maybe there are some gaps in your training.
Exactly.
We could give you some more support.
Yeah, sometimes it really is as simple as making sure the employee has all the information and resources they need to be successful.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But beyond that, it's also about fostering this culture of continuous learning and improvement.
Right, so that people don't feel like they're just stuck.
Exactly.
The way they are.
You want them to grow.
It feels like communication has got to be a big part of this whole equation too, right? You can't just train people in a vacuum and hope for the best.
Right. It's not enough to just throw information at people and hope they figure it out.
Exactly.
Management training, it really emphasizes that you got to have clear, consistent communication and feedback.
Okay, so we're not just talking about the once-a-year performance review, or it's
no.
Surprise, here's...
This is how you've been doing for the past 12 months.
Exactly.
It's got to be way more regular than that.
Okay.
We're talking regular check-ins, constructive criticism, making sure employees always know what's expected of them and how they're doing.
So no blindsiding people, basically.
Exactly. It's all about creating that culture of open dialogue where, performance is discussed openly and regularly.
Yeah, makes sense.
And this actually ties into another tool in the manager's toolkit, those performance management systems.
Oh, you mean PIPs and things like that?
Yes, those infamous PIPs.
Didn't we actually do a whole deep dive on PIPs a while back?
We did.
I feel like I'm having flashbacks.
That's right. We went deep on those.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is they're actually a really important part of this whole process.
Really?
See, good management training, it emphasizes that PIPs, they shouldn't just be treated like another bureaucratic hoop to jump through.
Oh, interesting.
It's not just paperwork.
So it's not just like check the box, did the PIP done?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's actually a tool to document that a manager has really tried other options before they even think about firing someone.
Oh, so it's like showing your work?
Yes.
Like we've tried this, this, and this, and the PIP is part of that.
It's all about showing that commitment to helping the employee improve.
Interesting.
Now, our source material, it also points out that there's this common trap that new managers especially can fall into.
Let me guess it's going straight for the fire button.
More often than not, yes.
Yeah.
It's so tempting to think the quickest fix is just to get a new person in there, right? Wipe the slate clean, start fresh.
It's like hitting the reset button on a video game.
Exactly.
When it gets too frustrating, it's like, I'll just start the level over.
Right. But experienced managers, they've learned it's rarely that simple.
Right. You can't just like hire your way out of every problem.
And they understand that high turnover, it actually reflects poorly on them as leaders.
Well, yeah, because if you're constantly having to replace people, it makes you wonder,
right,
are you the problem?
Exactly. Are you the one who's creating the issues here?
Yeah, that's a good point.
So companies, they're looking for managers who can demonstrate patience, mentorship, a willingness to develop their teams to see the potential in their employees.
So it's more about being a coach than like an executioner.
Exactly.
But all that being said, at what point do you say, okay, this really isn't working, we've tried everything, and it's time to let this person go?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right.
And our source material is very clear on this point. They say termination should only even be considered after every other avenue has been explored and documented.
So you got to go through the entire toolkit.
Yes, exactly. If you've been consistently giving feedback, offering support, maybe even adjusting their role or giving them more training, and you're still not seeing any improvement.
That's when you have that conversation.
Precisely. And at that point, it really becomes a matter of fairness, both to the employee and to the company.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Because you've given them every opportunity to succeed.
Right.
And if it's still not working, you have a very strong case for why this might be the necessary next step.
And you can show your work, basically.
Exactly. You've got the documentation to back it up.
So it protects everybody involved.
Exactly. It's about making sure that decision, whether it's to keep the employee or to let them go, is well-founded and fair.
Interesting. So it's almost like this whole process is as much about protecting the company as it is about managing the employee.
Absolutely. These procedures, they provide this framework, right, to make sure everything's being considered.
Makes sense.
Which protects the company legally and makes sure they've done everything they can to address the situation fairly.
Okay, so it's about fairness and it's about having a system.
Exactly.
Which is not necessarily what I think of when I think about like being a good manager.
Right.
But it's really interesting to hear how it all ties together.
It's all connected.
Yeah.
And it makes a big difference in the long run.
It does.
For everybody.
So we've talked about change management, training and development, communication performance management.
It's a lot.
It is a lot.
But it's all about giving those managers the tools they need.
Right, to make those tough decisions.
Exactly. And to support their employees effectively.
Because ultimately, at the end of the day, you want your employees to succeed.
Right.
And sometimes that means letting them go, but you want to make sure you've done everything you can.
You want to give them every chance.
Before you get to that point, it's almost like you're building a case, right? Like you said, either for keeping this employee and really investing in them, or if it comes down to it, for letting them go, but you got to have all that.
It's like you're building a case.
Evidence.
You have a structured approach. You're documenting everything so that no matter what happens,
right,
whether you keep them on or you ultimately have to let them go, you've done it fairly. And you can show that you've done it fairly.
This has been so interesting because I think when I think about management training, I think a lot about like the touchy-feely stuff, you know, like how to be inspiring, how to be a good leader. But it's really interesting to hear about this more like practical, strategic almost side of it.
It's so much more than just being the nice guy, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's not just about being friends with everyone on your team.
Right.
It's about
having those systems in place.
Yeah, having a system and understanding all these different pieces and how they fit together.
And For anyone listening who's in management or maybe wants to be in management, remember, your job isn't just to get rid of problems. It's to help people reach their full potential.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
And it's just giving you the tools to do that more effectively.
Really good insight. I love that perspective. Now, for everyone listening, we want to hear from you. What stood out to you in this deep dive into management training? What are your thoughts on this more strategic side of things? Head over to our socials and let us know.
Yes, join the conversation.
We love to hear from you guys. We'll be back next time with a brand new deep dive. Until then.
See you later.